so long by myself. Great. All right. Well, I guess I'll start again since hopefully nobody's in here. But all right. Well, I was sitting there I was tonight covering the UN speech between President Trump's speech at the UN and also Benjamin Netanyahu's speech at the UN. I guess my mic wasn't working and I didn't notice it, so I've been talking to myself. Luckily, somebody let me notice in the chat room. But pretty much, President Trump, I've heard all this craziness about the way what he said to the UN and all this stuff is pretty much he told the UN what they needed. He made the argument of the United Nations is supposed to be a peacekeeping force. They are literally supposed to help end wars. But yet, President Trump was the only person negotiating peace treaties between 7 different nations. Well, more than 7 nations, 2 nations to each 7, really 14 nations, 7 treaties. And not once was the UN involved in there. And President Trump has been the only person that's trying to negotiate a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. The UN has not stepped in to help. Considering even, and the point he's arguing about that is because some of the UN nations are actually friends with Russia. So why are they not doing, what point is having the UN if it's not even doing its job of negotiating peace? If it's not doing its job as a peacekeeping force? NATO is the war arm. They're the side that, yes, they protect each country, but it's the side that also goes to war. United Nations doesn't go to war over that. And so that's funny how I'll play a couple of the pieces from that, but pretty much Trump called balls and strikes, and he called it out. And he also called out the European nations for literally funding the Russia-Ukraine war by still purchasing oil and gas from Russia. No matter how many sanctions or tariffs that President Trump puts onto Russia, it won't have that much of effect if Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, Spain are all still buying gas and oil from Russia. Turkey, Lebanon, go down the list. And then as far as it comes to Israel and Netanyahu's speech and the Gaza war is literally people act like this 2-state solution's never been tried. Okay, they've talked about a 2-state solution ever since I can remember being alive. And they've actually done a 2-state solution before. And the problem is they were back right where they were at was war, because Palestinians do not want a Palestinian state next to Israel. They want a Palestinian state in place of Israel. They want Israel gone. They don't want to share the air with Israel. So even if it does create peace for 6 months or a year or 2 years, all that's going to be doing is giving Palestine or the Palestinians time to purchase weapons, jets, because they would be a country, or we say nation, we say state, but it's really nation state. You can't, in America, you got to look at it from a different picture. When we think states, we think like a state in the United States of America that's part of America. But that's not the way it works overseas. Over there, a state is a nation state. It's its own country. It's not, even though it's the size or smaller than most of the states in the United States are, it is not, it wouldn't be part of Israel. It wouldn't be part of any other country. It would be its own nation state. And they don't want that. They don't want a nation state. They don't want to share. So, and it's never worked. So sitting there and asking these 100 and some odd European countries, sitting there and saying they support a nation state, and sitting there and telling Netanyahu, oh, it'll be different this time. No, it won't, because the Palestinian Guard has got the same people there that are there now were there over 20 years ago. It didn't work 20 years ago. It won't work now. Hamas is a terrorist organization. It doesn't help that people like Turkey or Lebanon are calling them a liberation force or a liberty fighting force or any of that other than what they are, which is a terrorist organization. So hopefully I'll get here in a little bit, my co-host will be in, and that'll help break up some of the speaking. But I'm going to go ahead and try to see if I can play. I think it's this part of the speech from President Trump's UN speech, this little section I'm going to play. And let me get it up.
A week, and they've been fighting for 3.5 years and killing anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 young soldiers, mostly soldiers, on both sides every single week from 5 to 7,000 dead young people, and some in cities, much smaller numbers, where rockets are shot, where drones are dropped. This war would never have started if I were president. This was a war that should have never happened. It shows you what leadership is, what bad leadership can do to a country. Look what happened to the United States, and look where we are right now in just a short period of time. The only question now is how many more lives will be needlessly lost on both sides. China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one? In the event that Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, then the United States is fully prepared to impose a very strong round of powerful tariffs, which would stop the bloodshed, I believe, very quickly. But for those tariffs to be effective, European nations, all of you are gathered here right now, would have to join us in adopting the exact same measures. I mean, you're much closer to this. We have an ocean in between. You're right there. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them, and it was very embarrassing to them when I found out about it, I can tell you that. They have to immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia. Otherwise, we're all wasting a lot of time. So I'm ready to discuss this. We're going to discuss it today with the European nations, all gathered here. I'm sure they're thrilled to hear me speak about it, but that's the way it is. I like to speak my mind and speak the truth. As we seek to reduce the threat of dangerous weapons today, I'm also calling on every nation to join us in ending the development of biological weapons once and for all.
All right, so that was where he called out the European leaders for literally still purchasing and buying oil and gas from Russia.
In May, I traveled to the Middle East.
And then this is the section I'm about to put up that is for him doing the covering the talking about the whatchamacallit, the other part section I was going to play, but I'm going to play this section now, this part now. I just pulled them up in two different parts so I didn't have to recirculate them. But
to visit my friends and rebuild our partnerships in the Gulf and those valued relationships with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE and other countries are now, I believe, closer than ever before. My administration has negotiated one historic trade deal after another, including with the United Kingdom, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and many, many others. Likewise, in a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. They said they were unendable. You're never going to get them solved. Some were going for 31 years, 2 of them, 31, think of it, 31 years. One was 36 years. One was 28 years. I ended 7 wars. And in all cases, they were raging with countless thousands of people being killed. This includes Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, the Congo and Rwanda, a vicious, violent war that was, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. It included all of them. No president or prime minister, and for that matter, no other country has ever done anything close to that. And I did it in just 7 months. It's never happened before. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's working now. It just went on. Thank you. I think I should just do it the other way. It's easier. Thank you very much. I didn't think of it at the time because I was too busy working to save millions of lives. That is the saving and stopping of these wars. But later I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up.
All right, that was the section I was going to play, which explains pretty much, gets to the point of what President Trump has argued and why he's argued sometimes that maybe we should withdraw from the UN, because of the fact that literally the UN is not doing its job. They love to get to meet together and spend a lot of money on drinks and parties and eating and talking and patting themselves on the shoulder, and then they'll write, like he said, really strongly worded letters and speak in front of all the other countries and call people out for doing something or that they didn't like or that they don't think is within that is what breaks human rights or violates the human rights or violates war problems or anything like that, because the UN's not a court. They can't charge you, they can't convict you, they can't do all that. They can only convict you in the court of public opinion. But if they're not going to work to silence and work for peace, what's the point of the United Nations? That's literally what the United Nations was formed for, was to help ensure that we stay together and that we never end up in another world war like we had during World War I or World War II. And obviously, NATO was also an aspect of that, on the other fact of the North American Treaty Alliance, which was the North American and pretty much Eastern European countries coming together that to, if any one of those countries was ever attacked by one of the countries that is not in that group, that they would then come to that country's defense, which that was also based off of the fact that the United States stayed out of World War II for so long, and we didn't come in until we'd gotten attacked by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor, which was closer towards the end of the war. And a lot of people argue that if we'd come in early in the war, maybe it would have ended faster, and there would have been a lot less lives lost. And that's kind of the whole point. And there wouldn't have been as many countries who would have been overrun by the German Nazi force. Who knows? It could have ended up going the other way. It could have been a bad thing if we'd come in later. That's a total different debate, and that's a total different subject. Historically, I'm not a historian, so that's on a different subject. But the whole point is President Trump didn't do anything he shouldn't have done at the United Nations. He told them what they needed to hear, not what they wanted to hear. And that's the problem, is too many times our presidents in the past have told and only said what is politically expedient or niceties and what people at the UN want to hear. They don't say what the people at the UN need to hear and call people out and call balls and strikes, tell it like it is, tell the truth. And that's where we ended up at. And so we have the choice of staying in the UN and getting stuff done, or we have the choice of pulling out of it. But the fact is yes, he said he would like to have ended the Russian war on day one and would start working it, end it on day one, which he did start working in it. But obviously he was able to end 7 other wars. But Russia is a little bit harder to negotiate with, because all those other 7 countries, actually the only 2 countries, there was only one Pakistan and India were the only two other nuclear powers that he negotiated a treaty with and was successful, but they had just started. Their war wasn't 30 years, 20 years, 10 years like the other countries that he worked with. Pakistan and India had just started the war. They had just escalated into a war. So he was able to negotiate that one before it went too far. But with Russia, as big of a country as they are, and little as Ukraine is down here, I mean, Ukraine's literally smaller than the state of Texas. Russia is one of the largest countries in the world. Now, obviously, more than I'd say close to almost 75% of their country is unlivable because it's frozen tundra. So if you looked at the populated sections of their country, it's not that large. But if you look at the overall land mass of their country, it's the largest. But they're also one of the largest nuclear powers in the world. So it's a whole lot harder to negotiate with somebody like that when you have to be careful about instigating something into a nuclear war. And that's where President Trump has to be careful. And that's why it's a whole lot harder to negotiate this war, is because the fact you're negotiating with the world's nuclear powers. You can't threaten them like you can some of the other countries to get the wars to end. And that's where we come to the point with that. Now, the Netanyahu and Israel thing is one, this is a biblical war. It's been going on. A lot of people, somebody on my TikTok posted me today and said something about, oh, the Israelites are there and not the original Israelites that were there. You know what? When after the Roman Empire fell and the Ottomans took over, and which were the Muslims pretty much took over Israel, or what we know as Israel now, by the Ottoman Empire, they chased out all Christians and all Israelites. And those Israelites spread out all over the world. So they integrated, they mixed with other races. So unless you can actually sit there and show a genetic tree marker to show that none of the people that are living in Israel were actually, there are not descendants from the original Israelites that were there, that's kind of a moot point. Because just because they're not as dark skinned as the original Israelites that were living there doesn't mean that they're not the same, that they're not descendants from them. Now, obviously, they might have mixed with other and married other races and stuff because they moved into the United States, they moved to Germany, they moved to Russia, they moved to Europe, they moved whatever, all these different places. And then finally, after World War II, the Ottoman Empire had fallen during the time of World War II. And due to the fact that millions and millions of Jews had just been killed through the genocide in Germany, the world decided to give them a Jewish state, or Israel, which was originally their homeland anyways, if you go back to biblical times, because somebody said, oh, well, the Romans had it before the Ottomans. Well, if you remember, the Romans were actually under control of Israel when Jesus was born. It was still a Jewish state at the time, even though Rome ran it per se. Israel was still called the Jewish people still called it Israel. While it was under Roman rule, it was still Israel, and it was still a Jewish state. It was still majority population of Jews. Even when Jesus was born, who was born to Jewish parents in Bethlehem, which was part of Israel at the time. So to argue that, oh, the Romans had it, no, yes, the Romans took control, but the Israelites were still there. So now you've got the Palestinians who are trying to sit there and want Israel to give up the Gaza Strip, which is literally a coastal piece of land that's in the middle of their country. Their country goes to the south and the north of it, and wants them to give it up. But yet the problem is they don't want them to give up. They want the whole country. They want Israel gone. And Netanyahu talks about this in his speech. I'm hoping I've got it pulled up correctly. I hope I got it pulled up in the right spot. But right now I've got to the part where they're talking about the where he's calling about claiming the genocide part. So I'm gonna play this little section and then I'll fast forward it through and play the other section. Hopefully I'll have my co-host in here by then. And also anybody who's watching, please share, hit that like button. Also, if you've got any comments or would like to ask any questions or anything like that, please let me know in the comments. I am watching the chat, so that will help make the show better, because I really didn't prepare much of a script or a lot of stuff today because I was hoping to have my co-host here, when I have my co-host, it's a whole lot easier to bounce off of each other and work off of each other to keep stuff going and to talk about different subjects and bring it up. So I usually don't do a full hour by myself anymore. So please share with, if you're watching, please share with anybody that you have. Hit those like buttons. Let me know. And then also please engage in the comments. But now I am going to go ahead and play the Netanyahu speech, and then we will go from there.
Indictment of you. It's an indictment of weak-kneed leaders who appease evil rather than support a nation whose brave soldiers guard you from the barbarians at the gate. They're already penetrating your gates. When will you learn? You can't appease your way out of jihad, and you won't escape the Islamist storm by sacrificing Israel. To overcome that storm, you have to stand with Israel. But that's not what you're doing. As the prophets of Israel foretold in the Bible, you've turned good into evil and evil into good. Now I want to drill down on this. Take the false charge of genocide. Israel is accused of deliberately targeting civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposite is true. The head of urban warfare studies, Colonel John Spencer, he's perhaps the world's greatest expert on urban warfare. And he says, Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history. And because we're doing that, the ratio of non-combatant to combatant casualties is less than 2 to 1 in Gaza. That's an astoundingly low ratio, lower than NATO's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, especially when you consider that Gaza is one of the most densely populated urban areas on Earth. It has hundreds of miles of terror tunnels underground, and it has countless terror towers above ground, and thousands of terrorists embedded in the tunnels and in these towers in civilian areas. If you want to see what measures Israel takes to avoid civilian casualties in this war, just look at what we're doing now in Gaza City, the last Hamas stronghold, one of the 2 last strongholds. For 3 weeks, Israel dropped millions of leaflets, sent millions of text messages, and made countless phone calls urging civilians to leave Gaza City before our military moves in. At the same time, Hamas implants itself in mosques, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, and tries to force those civilians not to leave, to stay in harm's way. And it often threatens them at gunpoint if they try to do so. For Israel, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. Hamas uses civilians as human shields and as props in its sick propaganda war in Israel, against Israel, a propaganda war that the Western media buys hook, line, and sinker. Now, despite Hamas's threats, close to 700,000 Gazans, almost 750,000, have already heeded our calls and moved to safe zones. Now I want to ask you a simple question, a simple, logical question. Would a country committing genocide plead with the civilian population it is supposedly targeting to get out of harm's way? Would we tell them, get out, if we want to commit genocide? We're trying to get them out. And Hamas is trying to keep them in. And this charge is so baseless. The comparison to genocide, wholesale slaughter of populations. What, did the Nazis ask the Jews to leave, kindly leave, go out? Did others, you want me to name all the genocidal leaders of history? Just go one by one. Did anyone do this? Did they say, get out so we can come in? Of course not. So the truth has been turned on its head. Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization whose charter calls for the murder of all Jews on the planet. This genocidal organization is given a pass. It's barely mentioned. While Israel, which does everything it can.
Okay, that's all I can do of that hit, because I've because I guess I should have tried to pull it from something other than YouTube, because since the clip was from YouTube, YouTube was pausing it for a second or cutting it because you have to be added to that person's channels. So hopefully now that I have pulled it out, YouTube will let the rest of the video go and work. But there, he's adding the whole point in there. The fact is if they were trying to commit genocide against Gaza, against the Palestinian people, then why would they be doing the same thing that the United States did during the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq? Literally dropping leaflets, dropping leaflets, making calls, telling the people to leave. And the same thing happened during Afghanistan and the Iraq war. And the American side is when we had civilian casualties, it was because of the fact that Al Qaeda was using them as human shields. They would literally force them to stay. They would not allow them to leave. And that's how we ended up having those types of, we had a bunch of civilian casualties at the beginning of the war because they weren't allowing the civilians to leave. Because before we went into Fallujah, we did the same thing. We dropped leaflets, let them know, hey, anybody that's not that's not an Al Qaeda soldier, that's not fighting with Al Qaeda, leave now before the attack. Leave now before the attack, which kind of defeats the purpose of trying to get a surprise attack or trying to attack somebody and get in there and take them out. Because one, they're going to know that you're coming now because you're doing that. But now in today's world, you have to do that because it's considered what within human rights and what you need to do with human right wise. So that is the problem. I mean, back in the day, you just went in the country, took them out. If you had civilian casualty, it was a casualty of war because war is ugly. Casualties happen, and that's how it went. But you could actually get surprise attacks. And today, you can't do surprise attacks because of the fact that you have to drop out leaflets. But like Netanyahu said, if they were trying to commit genocide, why would they do that? Why would they literally do everything they can to ensure that the civilians are gone? I mean, they can't just do everything they can and then not go in and attack and just not attack Gaza at all because Hamas is literally forcing the citizens to stay. They can't do that. I mean, they would never be able to attack. They would never be able to go on with their objectives because there would always be citizens there. Even though 700, like you said, roughly 750,000 or 700,000 have fled, have left Gaza to safe zones or to refugee camps to wait until it's safe to go back home. But they can't be held responsible for the citizens that are literally forced and used as human shields because of the fact that Hamas likes to put their communication centers and all their stuff in underground connecting underground basements of hospitals or or put their SAMs or surface to air missile systems on the top of a hospital. So you're telling me that Israel is supposed to let a surface to air missile system that's constantly shooting missiles at them and hitting their people as they're coming into Gaza hit them just because it's on the top of a hospital? No, you're not. You're going to end up taking casualties in that one, but that's not your fault. That's Hamas's fault. And that's the problem is for some reason, everybody wants to agree with Hamas. Everybody wants to take Hamas's side or the Palestinian side when they're the terrorist organization. They're the one that's causing all this. And actually today, earlier today, there was news that came out that Mahmoud Khalil, the immigrant that had came here on a student visa who was sitting there and doing a lot of the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas protest at the colleges and universities, that was sitting there and pushing anti-Semitism and violence and everything. He was actually, the immigration judge actually ordered his removal today and revoked his green card due to him lying on his green card application. If I remember correctly, it had something to do with the fact that he had actually had connections to Palestine and the anti-Jewish Hamas movement. So his green card's been revoked. He is being deported to Syria, or I forgot one of the other countries. It's two countries that are going to deport him to, which is good because people should know that if you're going to come to America for a better life, for a better education, then you better act like it when you get here and not push terroristic, anti-American, anti-Semitic views. free speech is okay. Not agreeing with everything that goes on in America is fine. But if you're literally sitting there and espousing Hamas and pushing Hamas viewpoints, which is literally to eliminate the Jewish state and eliminate, same as Iran's, eliminate Jewish state and eliminate the United States, then why did you come here? Why are you here then? It makes no sense at all that you would come here if you don't want that. And then, so yeah, it's getting ridiculous. Unfortunately, I don't have my second person here today. I'll have to find another one to share that isn't on YouTube. I should have used Fox News because it's funny. When I shared a video from Fox News, YouTube didn't have any issues with it. But I guess because these clips, even though they were from the speech, but because they were already posted on YouTube or had YouTube's watermark on there, they were having issues with it. So it looks like we've got a couple people still left in. Please share, like, follow, push it out. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments and everything. And then I guess pretty much I've covered about all I can cover since I'm not getting any engagement here with the issues with that. As I'm going to talk about this James Comey instance that came, the grand jury indictment that came down. And then now they've assigned the judge. I thought they said they were going to have his arraignment today, but the official arraignment is actually booked for next week or the week after next in October. The judge he was assigned is a Biden appointed judge, but one person looks at him and says that he doesn't look like he's a leftist activist judge, that was more towards the end of Biden's term. This guy was pointing towards more of the middle, and he's a former prosecutor, so it looks like he may not favor Comey as much, that he might actually be a more fair judge versus being a more leftist activist judge that would only care that it's because the Trump administration's people are pushing. But I got a question. It's kind of funny. Whenever Democrats and the Biden administration went after President Trump and indicted him, it was justice. But when President Trump's administration presses charges and convenes a grand jury on people that were against Trump, that were anti-Trumpers, all of a sudden it's a affront to justice. It's just hypocrisy. This guy lied to Congress and multiple other things. I mean, the proof has come out that there's beyond the lies that he made to Congress. This was a lie about something being leaked to the media. It doesn't matter. This one charge right here allows a lot of those other charges they're getting creative, like they did with President Trump, where they sit there and took crimes that were literally beyond the statute of limitations, but made them into a felony, which put them within the statute of limitations and created a crime that wasn't there. By having this charge, now a lot of those other crimes that he committed that would have been related into this that are past the statute of limitations can now become not past the statute of limitations and be more towards a higher charge. Now, obviously, I honestly think the whole strategy of getting Comey in there is to get him to roll on the rest of the cabal in the Russia collusion hoax. Brennan, Clapper, Clinton, Obama, all of them. So when people say, oh, he won't spend a single day in jail, no, I don't think he will. I think he's going to end up rolling on all the other people that were involved in this Russia collusion hoax that literally tried to unseat a sitting president who was duly elected by the people of the United States. But just because he was not part of the political elite, because he was an outsider, because they didn't want him in there. So they went and created all this fake stuff. I mean, I've done multiple podcasts covering all of the information that's come out about how fake the Russia hoax was and how made up it was and what all the stuff they ignored and stuff. So there's way more things that James Comey is guilty of than just this. And then on top of that, earlier this week, it came out that Google actually admitted that they were censoring conservative content creators and stuff who didn't even violate their community guidelines, but because the Biden administration was pressuring them to censor them because what the Biden administration considered misinformation or harmful information, just because it wasn't what they agreed with, because they were citing COVID studies from other studies that maybe the Biden administration wasn't following. I mean, you want to talk about Nazis and dictators. That's what a Nazi dictator does right there. President Trump isn't squashing anybody's political speech or free speech. The Jimmy Kimmel thing was not a Trump thing. Maybe he said some stuff, and his FCC chairman said some stuff that maybe they shouldn't have, just because they were glad to see Jimmy Kimmel go and they didn't like him. But Jimmy Kimmel was suspended as a business decision. It had nothing to do with this. And honestly, if you look at how much better more people are watching his show now, or even know about his show, it almost makes it look like literally this was just a marketing gimmick to up his ratings, because his show, nobody was watching his show. I mean, the amount of people that are watching his show, the older millennial has more views on his videos in a week than Jimmy Kimmel was getting in viewers. So that's honestly, it was probably all a ploy, marketing ploy, which was a brilliant marketing ploy to make him, oh, he was attacked by Orange Man Bad. Now we got to watch him. Now we got to support him because they're attacking free speech, when they weren't. When it had nothing to do with Trump. It had everything to do with Comey. I mean, it had everything to do with a business decision of ABC and Disney. So it had nothing to do with the other fact. So I just think it's hilarious that the left, they're projecting onto Trump and the right, because everything that they claim that we do, they're doing. Just like when almost 2.5 weeks ago now, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, you didn't see Republicans go out and start burning down buildings and rioting and looting and protesting and spitting at cops and throwing stuff at police officers and everything like that. But yet when a Democratic black person gets killed, that's what happens on the Democratic side. But on the Republican side, we peacefully went out and held vigils and memorials and candlelights and prayers and singing hymnals. So it's the Democrats that have been doing, and then literally the left is still censoring stuff. I posted during Charlie Kirk's, the day Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I made 2 posts. The first post was about praying for sending prayers out to his family and praying that he would be okay. Facebook said it was sensitive content and demonetized it. Then the second one was about that he had passed and that he had been assassinated and everything and stuff. And then they put that, there was no videos of the assassination, no pictures of him being shot, not even a picture of Charlie Kirk. This was all just me talking. Again, they made it labeled as sensitive content and demonetized it. So Meta and them are still trying to silence conservative content creators. I mean, it's ridiculous. If saying Charlie Kirk, praying for his family, praying for his wife, praying for his kids because he was assassinated and taken at too young of an age is sensitive content, then you shouldn't be on social media. You probably shouldn't leave your house, because I'm sorry, the majority, almost everything they've ever said about the left has said about him is lies. They've done to him what they do to President Trump. They will take a 2 or 3 second clip from an hour-long debate with multiple people. They'll take a 2 or 3 second clip of him saying something that takes what he's saying totally out of context. If you had played 20 or 30 seconds before, 20 to 30 seconds after, you would realize that what they make it sound like he's saying is not what he's saying. Like they said he was a racist. He didn't believe, he believed race was a social construct and that we were all children of God and that under the skin we were all the same, that we were not genetically different. Our blood, all of our blood was red. We were all children of God, and that the color of our skin didn't matter. That was a racial construct. Just like when he said the thing about hoping that if he saw a black pilot, that pilot actually was good at his job. He wasn't saying that he didn't think black people could fly. He was talking about affirmative action and the fact that or DEI, the fact that black pilot gets hired, not because he's the best at what he does, but because that airplane company needs to meet their quota and needs to have so many black people on their payroll or so many non-white people on their payroll. That's what he was talking about, versus them being hired, knowing that they were hired based off of merit, meaning that they were the best at their job and they were the best for that position. That's what he was arguing. But, of course, they just played the one part where he said the thing about the pilot. They didn't play the beginning or the end of it where he was explaining about DEI and affirmative action. And that's what the left loves to do because they know they can't win a liable argument. I'm sorry, but just because he said a man can only be a man and a woman can be a woman doesn't mean he hated trans. It just means he didn't agree with what they that they can transition. Just because he believed marriage was between a man and a woman does not mean that he hated gays. He actually liked gays. He had plenty of friends that were gay. He had people within Turning Point that were gay. So that's what the left loves to do, is they love to spread all these lies and half-truths and innuendo about the right because they can't win on debate. They can't win on logical and intellectual debate. They can only win based off when they take their stuff in the lies. Now, one more thing before I end this, because I'm not going to quite make over an hour tonight. Like I said, didn't have my co-host, so probably wasn't that great of a show tonight. Didn't have much time to prepare. Been real busy. I'm still working on my doctorate. Taking 2 classes this 8 weeks, so a lot of reading, a lot of I was doing 2 shows a week during the summer when I had no classes, but now I can barely get 1 in. So right as I was coming home, this was announced that in Iowa, there was a school superintendent, public school superintendent that was arrested because he was illegally within the United States, had previous weapons charges, and was facing gun charges. Explain to me how somebody gets to the level of a school superintendent who is not legally in the country, who has a past criminal history and is facing current gun charges. How did they even get hired to literally be over the head of our schools, of our children, of our next generation? And this wasn't, and the sad thing is this was in Iowa, a conservative state. I mean, maybe it was in a big city in Iowa, so it was more of a liberal city, one or two big cities that are in Iowa, maybe it was liberal city or a liberal school district area, but it's crazy that happened. I mean, how do you let that happen, people? That is ridiculous that we could let that happen. So please, also, please check out my website down there, Patriots Corner with drhillaw.com. That is Patriots Corner with drhillaw.com. On there, you can see all of my past episodes, check all the previous shows out. See the ones also with my co-host in there, which I like doing better. Usually when I don't have a co-host, I prepare more of a script, so I have a lot more to go off of and don't have to try to sit there and fill up 50 minutes worth. But when it's like last week, the last 2 we did was over Charlie Kirk and the First Amendment and free speech. We discussed that, debated that, talked difference. We did we talked about the trans ideology movement that's literally now caused another attempt at assassination. I mean, like this assassin this week in Dallas, the guy thought he was trying to go after all of the Border Patrol guys and ended up actually harming the people he was supposedly trying to help. I mean, that's how crazy it's getting. The left has to stop using stochastic terrorism. That means they have to stop dehumanizing Border Patrol agents, ICE agents, dehumanizing anybody that's not there, doesn't believe what they believe, that is not on their side of the aisle, by literally calling every conservative or every Republican a Nazi. And all that, because when you call somebody a Nazi enough times, some of the people on the far left are going to start believing that. And then when they think you're a Nazi, they're like, oh, well, everybody will be happy when I get rid of that Nazi, because nobody wants a Nazi around, which is true. Nobody would want a Hitler or a Nazi around. So the left has to stop it, and sitting there and calling ICE and Border Patrol, the Gestapo and everything. That's what's causing all this to happen. Well, they may not be directly responsible for it. They are responsible. So we have to stop it. We have to get this back going. Everybody to come back to the middle. We have to get back to where we can debate and talk, and we can disagree on policies. We can disagree on views and still be friends. You can disagree on somebody's view or not agree with their point of view and not necessarily hate them, or it be hate speech, or that's not how it works. Just because somebody doesn't agree with your position, with your view, doesn't mean they hate you. It just means they don't agree with you. Period. That's the whole point of America. Is so people from all aspects of life, all beliefs can come together and form a country and can come together and find a way to agree in the middle. But it seems like we can't do that anymore. It seems like everything now has to be done through it with the left anyways, and Democrats. It's either you believe that a man can turn into a woman can turn into a man, or you're a transphobic, or you hate trans, or that you have to believe that marriage can be between anybody, not just a man and a woman, or you're phobic for gays, or you hate gays. That's not the way it works. I'm sorry, it's just not. I can like somebody and not agree with their life choices, and that's my right. I can be friends with them and not agree with their life choices, and that's my right. That's the way it is. We're America. If y'all are sitting there talking about free speech or act like Trump's trying to go, wait, no, Trump's trying to get it to where there's more people can talk and say stuff. But see, Trump doesn't sit there and call the left socialists and Nazis. He said socialism once or twice, but he doesn't repeat it 100 times. He sits there and says low IQ or ugly or whatever. He does the insults on a lower level, but not insults or put downs that are going to count to the level of somebody literally going out and deciding that that person's bad enough that they should take them out. So hopefully next Wednesday or Friday when we're on, I've been trying to do it on Wednesdays because Wednesdays it seems to be busier than Fridays because there's a lot more stuff going on Fridays. But hopefully Wednesday my co-host will be able to come on and go on it. I will on Wednesdays we do 7 p.m. I will have it scheduled, set up, so you will know it'll be pre-set up on my YouTube and my Facebook. For some reason, Restream doesn't pre-set it up on the Rumble or my X. So please hit that follow, subscribe button. Also like, share. Really would appreciate you coming back next week and listen. Hopefully we'll have, like I said, I'll have my co-host on here. So it'll be more of a debate back and forth, covering all different subjects through all that. And it'll be a whole lot better show versus just me trying to talk and fill up space for an hour because I didn't have anything prepared for tonight. But I wanted to get an episode done because I hadn't done one all week. So thank you for watching, for everybody who's been on here, and y'all have a good week.